Our incompetent, extremist and corrupt government were elected on the slogan, "Get Brexit Done." But with Brexit import controls delayed until next year, and part of the UK still within the EU customs union, Brexit is not even at the end of the beginning of being done. And it's getting less done by the day, as firstly, the Brexit agreements are torn down by Lord Gormless, David Frost, and secondly, so-called temporary measures are being enacted by this government which are partially reversing some of the Brexit measures that have so far been implemented. I'm beginning to wonder if rejoining the EU will end up happening in 1,000 small steps, so as not to alienate the government supporting Brexit gammons. Let's take a closer look. If you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new releases twice weekly. Transport Minister and former Remain campaigner Grant Shapps has announced a temporary extension of cabotage rights in the UK so that lorries coming into the UK from the EU can make unlimited journeys for 2 weeks within the UK whilst here, sweeping away the previous Brexit red tape. This is giving back a right to EU drivers that Brexit had previously taken away. This follows on from the government offering work visas to EU lorry drivers wishing to return to the UK. By the way, of the 3,000 offered, only 20 have at this moment actually been taken up. But nevertheless, the offer was there, and I'm beginning to think that this may be an indication of how Brexit is going to pan out long term. Thin slice by slice, this catastrophic Brexit will have to be undone. Clearly, the word temporary is code to mean we're not really undoing Brexit, when actually, albeit in very small ways, that's exactly what Johnson's cabal are doing. It's almost like they know what they need to do, but don't want their voters to see the reality of the situation. And at the same time, as they bring in various measures and call them temporary to save face, they're trying to unpick the Brexit agreements that they negotiated, agreed to, signed, ratified and implemented. Lordy David Frost is now claiming that the Northern Irish Protocol was drawn up in extreme haste in a time of great uncertainty, as a justification for why him and his carer, Boris Johnson, are threatening to rip it up. But the truth is, according to Boris Johnson's strap-on brain, Dominic Cummings, at the time when signing it, Frost and Johnson had every intention of reneging on it once Johnson had won re-election. To quote Cummings, "Newsflash, cheating foreigners is a core part of the job." Cummings, Johnson and Frost seem to think that the ends justifies the means. They trashed the United Kingdom's international reputation as an honourable nation as a price worth paying just to get Brexit over the line. The supposed popularity of Brexit is some sort of justification for acting in bad faith. Frost said this week, "I don't see anything wrong with Brexit being described as a populist policy. If populism means doing what people want, challenging a technocratic consensus, then I am all for it." He went on to quote from the 18th century politician and writer Edmund Burke, who he described as one of my country's greatest philosophers. Never mind that Frost is English and Edmund Burke was Irish, it just goes to show how Lord Gormless got his nickname. Edmund Burke also once said, by the way, "Our ministers and representatives owe us their judgment, and that they betray us instead of serve us if they sacrifice their judgment to public opinion." And to me that pretty much sums up Brexit. Michael Gove's "We've had enough of experts" quip confirms this. Let's give the people what the right-wing press tell them they want, even if they don't really understand what it is exactly that they want, which of the many types of possible Brexit they actually thought they were voting for, or why they wanted it in the first place. Now, I'm not being patronising to Leave voters here. EU membership and Brexit involve complex issues about international trade, economics and diplomacy that never cross most voters' minds, Remainers or Leavers. I think we all know far more about these issues now than we did during the advisory referendum in 2016, but it's a bit late now. I mean, how many voters, Remain or Leave, were aware of the implications for Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement? How many realised that they would lose their freedom of movement rights to live, love, work and retire in 27 other countries? How many honestly thought that because of Brexit, EU workers returning home would lead to shortages of food in the shops and fuel at the filling stations, businesses closing because of a lack of workers, crops rotting in the fields and mass culls of livestock that couldn't be butchered due to a lack of butchers? How many voters realised they were signing away their rights to retire to sunnier climes, or that mobile phone roaming charges would return in the event of a leave vote? Honestly, how many of us could say that these matters were foremost in our minds when we placed the X in the box back in that advisory referendum? As Edmund Burke said, our politicians failed us. They sacrificed their judgment to majority public opinion, which in any case was only ever pro-Brexit for 1 week either side of the referendum, rather than using their expertise to actually do their job and do what they knew to be right for the country. They betrayed us instead of serving us. Like many pro-EU commentators, I'm often accused of being a traitor. But it is government ministers, along with shadow ministers, including Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer, that were the traitors, riding the populist bandwagon rather than doing their jobs, whether governing or providing opposition, and ensuring that this disastrous Brexit never came about in the first place.